Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Anthropology 415 593. We are in week 15. It's our short week because it's Thanksgiving. This is the only time we're going to meet this week. And we're going to have a couple presentations today. We're going to have Taylor and Lauren. And then if we have time, we will watch Jacob's as well. Just a little reminder before we get started today. We are almost at the end of the semester. If you haven't turned in your paper yet, please turn it in by Friday. That's why I moved it back to give you a little bit extra time to work on during the Thanksgiving break. Also, a week from today, Monday the 28th, is going to be the last day to turn in any late work. Please do that. After the 28th, the only thing we'll be accepting is the revision of your poster as well as test number 2. And we'll have a review for test number 2 on the 30th, a week and 2 days from now. Okay, we're going to start off, I guess, with Jacob's presentation, and then we're going to roll into Taylor. So let's get started. We had a little bit of technical difficulties with Jacob's presentation. Jacob, you can resend a better version of that. And we're going to move on to Taylor. So Taylor is going to give your presentation on
bottled water usage versus wealth.
All right, take it away, Taylor.
All righty, so water bottle usage versus wealth is kind of a rough name for it. What I actually studied was how much do people spend on bottled water? So let's get a move on, shall we? I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out how to get to the next slide. Alrighty. So that is my research question. How much do people really spend on bottled water? And there were a lot of things that I came into contact with, different variables that started affecting my variables, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, my variables were bottled water usage, so how much bottled water they were drinking. Now, that included buying it at the grocery store, buying it at basketball games, buying it at fairs, just how much bottled water are you drinking and how much are you spending on that water? Are you buying a case of it? What brands are you buying? Are you buying it cheap? Are you buying it expensive? How much money are you spending on bottled water?
What's your research population?
Huh?
What's your research population? Study.
Oh, people with higher income versus people with lower income.
Okay. And how did you do different? What's the breakdown between? How would I know if I'm high income?
Oh, I gave above 60,000 or above 40,000 and below 40,000. Awesome. And my background literature, these are what I did my annotated bibliographies on. So for the first one, it's how these aren't the names of the articles. These are just little notes that I put for myself so I would remember what these articles were about. So the first one was about wasting water, and it was about how many people who have higher incomes tend to use more water. That is what I took out of that. That is what I took away from that specific article. The second one was about natural disasters, hurricanes specifically, and people not having water. And what I took away from it was people who stockpile water during natural disasters, or often the first to do so, or are able to do it, are the people who can afford it. So most of the time, people who have larger incomes can stockpile these massive bottles of water. And we actually saw this happen in our own city, Portales, when the water went out here. But that's a whole nother slide I will get into. So the next up, we have my methods. So my methods for my participant observation, sorry, I should have put that for that methods one right there. I should have put that, my apologies. But I went to three different events. Hey, girly pop. I went to 3 different events. The first one was Adelaide Day. And there I paid attention to how many people were buying bottled water versus how many people were buying sodas. You know, are you spending money on water? That was one of my variables. That was one of the variables that came into play that I had to account for. So instead of instead of taking into account how many people are buying Cokes versus how many people are buying water, I paid attention to the people that were specifically buying water. How much water were they buying? Were they buying water for their whole family, or was it just them? How much were they spending on this water? And that's something similar that I did at the basketball and the football game. However, at the basketball and the football game, what I did instead was I paid attention to the people who were bringing home like reusable bottles of water, like the what are they called? The like hydro flasks and things like that, people who were bringing those versus people who were bringing or buying bottles of water, plastic bottles of water. You will usually spend more on a case of water than if you're reusing reusing tap water or filtering water. And that was another variable that kind of came into play, but I started mostly paying attention to the people, once again, who were only buying bottled water. How many, what were they doing with it?
How were you able to determine the income of people who were buying water?
I went up to them, I talked to them, I asked them what, I didn't specifically ask them what their income was, but I asked them what they did for work. And by that, I could determine a rough estimate of what their salary was.
You're looking at that.
Yeah. So for my life histories, I used 3 different people: Angie Aguilar, Amelia Sanders, and Jose Mendez. These 3 people are either have lived here or no longer live here anymore. And so for Angie Aguilar, she is a woman in her mid-40s. She mostly buys bottled water for her and her sons. She's got 2 little boys. They are the absolute cutest. I am so sorry. My father doesn't seem to understand that I'm in class. Angie Aguilar, I asked her a lot of questions about, hold on, let me pull that up so I can give you guys the exact things that she said, because I don't want to quote her if I don't have it specifically. My apologies. All right, I can't find it. But I asked her a lot of questions about what she does. She is an accountant and she makes roughly around 75,000, but her and her husband bring in about 1,500, or sorry, not 1,500, $150,000 a year. They buy at least 2 cases of bottled water a month, and they go through that pretty quickly. And I asked them, and they roughly spend about, what was it? 14, about $50 a month on bottled water. Up next, we have my surveys. I sent out, most of my questions were about what bottled water, do you drink bottled water? Do you drink filtered water? What bottled water brands do you buy specifically? And how much of this bottled water do you buy? That kind of roughly puts together the kinds of questions that I was asking. And I sent out 10 surveys because of some of the people in my life and that I know here. They got a little bit busy. They didn't have a lot of time to send back these surveys or to do them. So I only got 3 back. And something interesting that I learned was that people really don't like talking about money. So I sent out a first draft of the surveys, and when I asked them what their income was, I put in fill in the blank. So they were able to put in their own incomes, and I noticed that the surveys that I put out, people didn't want to answer this question. So I changed it, and I put, what is your profession? And then I also put, if you would like to answer, pick one of these. I gave them like slots. So like $0 to 20,000, 20,000 to 40,000, 40,000 to 80,000. And I had them pick those, and I was able to get more response on that one than the original survey that I had sent out. But most of the questions about water did get answered. So I was pretty happy about that, that I didn't need 2 separate ones about that. For my cultural domain analysis, For the cultural domain analysis, the one that I did was bottled water brands. I did bottled water brands because that will help me figure out how much money people are actually spending on bottled water. Because great, if you buy a case of great value water, it's going to be a much different price than if you were to buy a case of Fiji water. Fiji water is much more expensive. And I also I used this specific thing because I wanted to know what people think about water, or not necessarily what people think about water, but how much money people are spending on it and what kind of water they're spending their money on. And what I found was that in the first set of separations, people were separating, in the first couple sets of separation in the list, people were separating by price. They were putting great value Dasani on one side, Fiji water and spring water, Voss water on the other side. But once they started getting lower into the separations, I noticed a completely different trend starting. People weren't separating by price, people were separating by taste. And that was very interesting. That was something that I needed to figure out. Are people spending money on water for the price, or are they doing it for the taste? This is something that I need to now think about. And how did I account for that being an extra variable? I asked people, do you buy water for taste, or do you buy water for taste, or do you buy water for just to have the bottle or by price? And the people who answered by taste, I took them out of my surveys because I didn't want that to be an extra variable that I had to account for. So I wanted as much control over my variables as possible.
How many people did you have to take out of your survey?
3.
You only had 3?
No. I got at the very end of like the surveys that I was doing, I had 3. So by the time, once I did all of those things, by the end of it, I had 3 people. So I started out with maybe 12, 15, but then I had to take 5 out for something, 2 out for something, 3 out for something, and then I ended up with 3 at the end. So the digital artifacts that I use, they don't necessarily apply to bottled water, but they do apply to a water outage, which caused everyone to go and buy water. And I wanted to really look at these because in this first one, in this time of no water, please be considerate that the whole town doesn't have water. So please save some water for others. We all have family to care about. That was a post to Portales community about people going and buying all of these waters. And if you remember from my annotated bibliographies, I said that many of the people who stockpile bottled waters during natural disasters or power outages, water outages like this, are often the people that can afford to do so. And so that was something I really wanted to look into. Who is buying all these water? Is it big families? Are they just trying to get as many bottles of water as possible? Are they trying to shower? What are people using it for? And should I take into account events like this in my questions that I'm asking? Should I take into account, hey, there was a water outage, is that going to go into how much money they're spending on water? And last but not least, we have my results. So something that I discovered, so these are some of the discoveries that I had. People with more money spend more on bottled water. People with more money buy more expensive bottled water, and people with less money buy water bottles less. So what I mean by this, in that first one, more people with more money who live a little bit of a more frugalist life spend more on bottled waters versus filtered waters. People with more money buy more expensive water because they often buy for taste versus price. So they're buying Voss Fiji water because they like the taste of it versus great value water, which Personally, as someone who's done it, Great Value Water is the best bottled water brand to buy. But lastly, we have people with less money buy bottles of water less, and that means that when they go out to events, they usually bring their own water versus buying a water bottle at the game because they know that the prices are through the roof, versus people who have a little bit more money can say, hey, I don't need to come prepared. I can just buy a bottle of water at the event. So my analysis would be the big picture. Ooh, sorry about those typos. The big picture is people wasting water, and what I found is that most people with more money waste water more than buy more. They buy more, waste more plastics, and don't use filtered water. People with less money waste less water because they can't afford it. That is a lot of the answers that I got from people in the lower income range. They were saying, I just can't afford it. I can't afford to do that. I have to use filtered water because I can't afford to buy a bottle of water. I can't, and that was often the answers that I was getting from some of these people. And last but not least, my conclusion. What I found overall is that people with more money can spend more money. But I think that's something that we all knew. And it wasn't going to change when it came to bottles of water. People with more money stockpile all these bottles of water, and then they have it for all this time, and then they still use filtered water. And it kind of just goes around in a circle. But some of the questions that I wanted to ask were, is there any correlation between wealth and attitudes about water usage? Because I didn't really get into the attitudes of, well, is it wasting water to them, or do they feel like they've earned it? These are questions that I didn't really get into, that I would have liked to ask, but didn't really have time to research on top of my own research. And do wealthier people waste more water than those who have less? And this one was kind of answered. I did find that wealthier people do tend to waste more water, but it wasn't something that I fully went into, and I wish I could have a little bit more. But that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Guys, ask me a question so that way he doesn't. Come on.
Great, maybe I missed it, but how did you qualify wealth? I know you said based off of, like basically the occupation. Like how did you nail it down exactly? Somebody just says Air Force, it could be an airman, like 30,000, but it could be an officer, like 120,000.
Yeah, so there were some people who did just tell me their income. There were people that I sat down with that I knew personally, so I was able to ask them that question. But with people that I ran into at like baseball games or basketball, I didn't go to no baseball games. At like the basketball games, was I asked them their profession. I asked them more questions about it. What do you do specifically? Are you higher up? Are you lower? And then if they didn't feel like answering that question, which a lot of people didn't, I kind of just went home and Googled a rough estimate to kind of just put them into some kind of a box.
Thank you, Lauren. Do you have a question?
What was your hardest, what was the most challenging thing you had?
Talking about money. That one was probably, I did not anticipate it to be as hard as it was, but getting people to talk about money and finding like accurate research about occupations and what those occupations make was pretty difficult. But in the end, I was able to kind of pull it together. But that definitely was some of the hardest parts, was getting people to open up and talk about money.
Your variables are water bottle usage versus wealth. Can you share with us any quantitative data and tell us, like, people who make above 60,000 or 80,000 or whatever use on average 4 bottles a day or 3 bottles a day versus people who are under? Can you show us some data or talk to us about some of this relationship more specifically than kind of the broad overall picture?
That is a wonderful question. I cannot. I kind of don't really understand the question either.
So you're looking at water bottle usage versus wealth, but I want to see some data. I want to see, like, what are the numbers that you got, or like how much water bottles, do people use it different? Well, did you get any of that? Like people who make under 20,000 use on average this much versus people who are over use this.
Well, I kind of separated them into two groups, over 40,000, or over 40,000, under 40,000.
So
And
for
I
water
found-
bottles, so you can see, is there a difference between these two?
Let me see, I think I do have this information.
On the weekend?
On average, people who were making over 40,000, used on average 2 cases of water bottles a month versus people who were under used half, averaged out, only drank about half a gallon or half a case of bottled water.
Another question is, you found that people who have more money spend more money. And that seems pretty common sense, you know, people who buys a new car versus a used car, while people who have more money probably buy a car or a used car. But what was something surprising that you found, or interesting, or unexpected that you found when you did your research?
Let me see. Something interesting that I found was that people actually prefer Dasani over Aquafina, which was kind of surprising because I figured Dasani was going to be like the worst kind of brand that people would want, but people actually grouped Dasani with Evian pretty often. Or no, not Evian, sorry. Great Value, which personally I think is the best water, but yeah, people really like Dasani. I did not think that they would.
Cool. All right, thanks so much.
I did it, guys.
Would you like to go next Monday?
Yeah, but like I have all the results, but how do you guys like put into charts and graphs? Yeah.
With PowerPoint?
Like how do you section it off? You know what I mean? Like it's not.
I got it. You can do that on next Monday. Will be our last time if you would like. Or you can go today.
Bro, I waited out. Thank you, Taylor. I will read that.
All right, so that's the end of our presentations for today. Next Monday, so we don't have class on Wednesday or Friday. Next Monday, the 28th, is going to be our last day for presentations, and Lauren and Ethan are going to go, and hopefully we can get a better copy of Jacob's and we can show his as well.
I won't be the only one for this.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, you'll be fine. On Wednesday, we'll do the review for this class. Our test number 2 is coming up, and then on Friday will be test number 2. Yeah,
Are we gonna, we have another test in this class?
there's 2 tests.
Are you freaking kidding me?
Okay, so that's gonna wrap up for today. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Enjoy your Thanksgiving break and I will see you in 1 week from today. Make sure you turn in any late work by 1 week from today, the 28th. That's the last day I'm gonna accept any late work. After that, the only thing that I'll be accepting is your revision of your poster and your final test in here, test number 2. Remember your paper, I moved that deadline back to the 25th this Friday to give people a little bit more time since there were still a few of them outstanding. That way you could have those couple days off to get finished up. Thanks so much for a great presentation today, Taylor, and we will wrap up with that. Thanks so much. See you next week.